Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Dacey. I'm the Executive Director of the Sine Institute of Policy and Politics here at the American University. We're so glad that you could join us today. With us, we have Ruth Marcus, who many of you know is the Deputy Editorial Page Editor for The Post. She writes a column for The Washington Post as well, and she joined the national staff in 1986. And Ruth, I know you were covering campaign finance, Justice Department, Supreme Court, and the White House. So what an honor it is to have you join us today to talk about the issues of the Supreme Court vacancy and how we're moving forward. In a great way, too, you're also a lawyer. You're a graduate of Yale College, but also Harvard Law School, a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for commentary in 2007. I will also say you're the author of Supreme Ambition, Brett Kavanaugh and the Conservative Takeover. So your expertise in the Supreme Court is much needed today in our conversation. My favorite title for you, though, is that you were the first cohort of Sine Institute Fellows here at the university. And so we were honored to have you then, and we're honored to have you now as an alum fellow, and for you to join us today. And so we're going to just get into some questions, and then we're going to encourage anybody that's signing on to Facebook now to just send your questions into Ruth. Of course, there's a lot to talk about here. Ruth, welcome. We're so glad that you could join us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thanks to you and thanks to AU and the Sine Fellowship. I actually had the fellowship while I was working on my book about Justice Kavanaugh and the confirmation process, Supreme Ambition. And it was a great way to talk about the confirmation process over time and how it's changed really quite remarkably during my lifetime.
Yes, and so let's go back to, it was January 27th. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer announces his retirement from the Supreme Court, and it's opening a door for a new member to be selected by President Biden. So what was your first reactions to that announcement? You've certainly heard other ones and followed these and reported on all of these. What January 27th, did you see it coming? Did you know? What did you think originally?
Well, I both saw it coming and didn't see it coming. I definitely was confident that that this would be Justice Breyer's last term on the Supreme Court. And I was quite surprised, though there had been a little bit of rumblings. I was quite surprised that he took the very unusual, but I think very wise step of announcing it early on. As many of the folks who are listening to this or watching this know, it's much more traditional to have this end of term suspense situation. Yeah. Will he, won't he, will she, won't she, for justices. And I sort of didn't think that we were going to be at this stage until June of this year or July of this year. I had hoped very, very strongly, and I took the unusual step of writing this kind of to Justice Breyer, hoping he would read it. Not that I thought he would be necessarily listening to me, that he really should have done this last year. And the reason that he really should have done this last year has nothing to do with Justice Breyer, but it has a lot to do with our current political landscape, which is that Senate Democrats obviously control the majority by a hair, or as some of them have said to me, by a single heartbeat. If something were to happen to threaten the Democrats' majority, I think that it would be very, very difficult to have President Biden retain the ability to confirm a Supreme Court justice. So I think that, honestly, much as Justice Ginsburg gambled that her health would allow her to survive the Trump presidency, or gambled, in fact, more explicitly that Trump would not be elected, and so that she could stick around so that her successor would be replaced by President Clinton. That didn't work out so well. Justice Breyer's gamble has, knock on wood, worked out better. He decided that it was better for the court and possibly better for him to stick around for another term. I think that that's going to work out okay, but it was a really dangerous risk that he took.
And it's interesting because, to your point, they are hearing cases. The Supreme Court's meeting. They're, and so as this process is going on, so let's talk about process for a minute, because Senators McConnell and Schumer are set to meet with the nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson on Wednesday of this week. Can you give us some context for some of us that don't know the insight? Like, what are those meetings about? What will happen in subsequent days? Because there is a traditional process for a lot of this when once the nominee is named, which President Biden did do last Friday. So,
Well, the party whose nominee it is always has an interest in doing this as quickly as possible, even as they assert that they are providing maximum access to documents, maximum transparency, maximum ability for the other party to review the nominee's record, etc. The party on the opposite side of the president, or the opposite side of the majority of the Senate, when they're the same, is going to say, no, we'll need more time. This is a lifetime appointment. We really need to fly spec this record, and we're going to need some time to go through documents. So there are always these conversations about process that happen at this point. This one is particularly complicated because of the nature of the, as I mentioned before, the slim Democratic Senate majority. And so while I think that this is not going to be Mitch McConnell's last stand, this nomination, I don't think he thinks he can block it. I don't think, since he doesn't think he can block it, that he wants that to make this a cause célèbre, and we can talk about that more. But there are still lots of questions about, technically, if the Senate Judiciary Committee is split evenly, because the Senate is effectively split evenly, the mechanisms for getting a nomination like that out of committee with a split vote, how long you can hold it over, what it will take if nobody provides a vote to help her get out of committee. You'll have to go to the Senate floor to basically dislodge the nomination and get that moving. What happens if Senator Lujan is not able to be back yet, or if something else, God forbid, happens to another senator on the Democratic side? So there's lots of technical conversation that has to happen, but there will also be sort of lots of course, we just need to have a searching inquiry into the qualifications of this nominee conversation as well.
Is it's a true vetting process, and you will see a lot of these issues come up. I want to remind everybody to please submit your questions as we go. We'll try to get to as many of those with Ruth as possible. One did pop up that's actually a good follow-up to that is it seems that the administration would like to see their nominee, Ms. Jackson, confirmed by April. Somebody else, is that a reality? Like, can that happen in that amount of space with all these, the process, the technicalities, the political makeup you're talking about? Is that feasible?
It's feasible, but it will require the cooperation, I'm pretty sure, of Senator McConnell. I think and if I were Senator McConnell, I would say, excuse me, but what's the rush here? The Justice Breyer is on the bench. He's going to be on the bench until the end of this term. Justice Jackson, when she becomes Justice Jackson, because I think that's almost certain, will have plenty of time to get up to speed. And so there is no need for an unseemly rush. Now, some of you who are listening to this might be tearing your hair out at my imagined phrase from Senator McConnell, unseemly rush, because you may be thinking, as I'm thinking, excuse me, isn't this the guy who helped barrel through Amy Coney Barrett in a remarkably short period of time, really unprecedentedly short for the modern age of confirmations, on the eve of an election? Just before the election, and asserted that it was imperative that we do it in a quick way. There, in judicial confirmations, there is really pretty much no such thing as consistency from either party. Everybody argues what is best for their side. So Mr. Speed It Up, Senator Speed It Up, for the Barrett nomination is going to be Senator, let's take our time and do this judiciously, and the world's greatest deliberative body for the Jackson nomination.
Yeah, it does seem with every nomination, depending on what party is, control, that the timing changes in their mind of what's expedient and what's necessary. But to your point, the business is happening. It's not like there is a holdup and they're not able to go through some of these cases and whatnot. But I do think, I want to go back to, as somebody who has definitely read your book, Supreme Ambition. This was a real moment in time when you were writing, the book, because even with a new member replacing Justice Breyer, is the makeup still going to be more conservative? Like, how does this nomination, it might change the face of the Supreme Court in a lot of ways, but does it change the political ideology or, how this court will act going forward?
It really doesn't. And that is why I am fairly confident that while there may be some shenanigans, posturing, chest thumping from some of the Republican members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, in the end, Senator McConnell knows that unless something happens, Democrats have the votes. And he also knows that right now there are 6 conservative Supreme Court justices. After Justice Jackson takes the place of Justice Breyer, there will still be 6 conservative Supreme Court justices. So the court, with every new member, the court changes. I think it's possible that the court will shift a little bit to the left from Justice Breyer with the addition of Justice Jackson, but just a little bit. And it really, if you're looking at it from an outcome point of view, it really doesn't matter, because if you're going to win by 6, it doesn't matter what the 3 have to say. Or if you're going to win by 5, it doesn't matter that much what the 4 have to say. You're still winning. So this is not where Senator McConnell, who is deeply, deeply invested in shaping the federal judiciary. He worked hand in glove with President Trump to add these 3 justices to the Supreme Court and to reshape the lower federal judiciary. This is not his hill to die on at all.
Well, it's interesting because one of the follow-up questions is, do you think this means for McConnell and others a speedier confirmation process? If it was going to be a matter of changing those dynamics of the court, do you think we would be seeing a different process for sure?
It would be a different process for sure. I think that Senator McConnell has a lot of different issues. He's got a election coming up in November where he is very hopeful of being able to reclaim the Senate majority. He does not want, in conjunction with that election, either to do anything that depresses his base, but his base isn't going to be riled up about this because they already know they've won on the court. But he also doesn't really want to do something that is going to alienate or energize the Democratic base, and in particular, Black voters, Black women voters, who turn out in significant numbers. And you just don't want to be, if you can count to 50 or 51 with the vice president breaking the tie, and you'll probably, I suspect that Judge Jackson will get more votes than that. Why do you want to stir up the other side and alienate voters that you've been trying to woo with some success to your side?
Yeah, I think in a interesting way too. When I was kind of preparing for this conversation with you, it says that all but 3 of the 115 justices who have served on the Supreme Court since 1789 have been white. All but 5 have been men. So, if confirmed by the Senate this spring, Ms. Jackson will be the first Black woman to don a justice's robe. What impact do you think these historical nominations, confirmations have on the court?
Well, every justice has an impact on the court, but the firsts definitely have a significant impact. And I want to say that while I said that as a Substantive matter, at least in the short term, in the first 10 years, maybe in the first 20 years of her tenure, Justice Jackson isn't going to probably make the difference in terms of how the vote on the court comes out. She does make a difference to the country in a lot of ways. And these are not in order, but I'll give you a few. One of the things that we haven't been talking about enough, I think, is the fact that there will now be, with her addition, 4 women out of 9 justices on the court. That's a real significant group of women. I am old enough to remember. I'm not just old enough to remember, I'm old enough to have written about the court when the first woman was about to join it, Justice O'Connor. She was very lonely there without female companionship, as it were, without another woman on the bench for, I think it was 11 years until Justice Ginsburg joined her. And I've been at panels where I've heard them talk about how it's really significant to have a number of women. This will be the 3 liberal justices and Justice Barrett on the conservative side, to have women even on the Supreme Court. You know, sometimes when women talk, they get talked over, they get interrupted at oral argument, things happen. Four out of 9 is just a really sea change on the court in my lifetime. One that I really feel personally. One that the other is what everybody has talked about, which is the addition for the first time of a Black woman on the Supreme Court. It's the numbers that you give about our history and the number of white men who've been on the court is both familiar and extraordinary. It's one of the things, and I was thinking about this in connection with Justice O'Connor's arrival on the court. When President Reagan fulfilled his campaign pledge to name a woman to the Supreme Court, he didn't have a lot of great choices. There weren't a lot of female judges. There were definitely not a lot of female federal judges. He plucked Justice O'Connor from the Arizona state legislature. She turned out to be a very good justice, and her experience in the Arizona state legislature, I think, made her a better justice, and she had been on a court in Arizona as well. But the fact that now, from my point of view, President Biden had the choice of at least 3 and more extraordinarily well qualified Black woman candidates to choose from to satisfy his campaign pledge just tells us something really good about progress in America. And we should take a moment, I think, to appreciate that, even as we're going through all sorts of worries about the state of our democracy.
Yeah. I think to your point, all of those, potential candidates, that names that were floating around right after January 27th, it was incredible to see the credentials and the kind of careers that they had and the positions that they've had. Certainly, we look at this elite set of judges and the decisions they make, but to your point, they do come from lower benches many of the time and from different parts of the country. How important is it when you see that change on the national level? What has to happen in courts all over the country to make sure there's that people are influencing the process on the judicial side at every point?
Well, President Trump's probably greatest success as a president was in his transformation of the federal judiciary. And we see the lingering impacts of that every day, not just at the Supreme Court, but in the lower courts, in terms of the legacy of judges that he appointed that are ruling in what I consider to be really quite dangerous and frankly radical ways. President Biden has not gotten a lot of attention for this, but he has been much more forceful than most Democratic presidents have been in insisting not just that people of diverse backgrounds be appointed to the court, that he's appointed a remarkable number of women. He's appointed a remarkable number of people of color, but he has concentrated very heavily, and Judge Jackson's selection also underscores this, on adding a different kind of diversity to the bench, which is it's not just people who came up through the traditional corporate law, probably federal prosecutor, government lawyer background. He's named an unprecedented number of public defenders, including the first former federal public defender, Judge Jackson, to be a Supreme Court justice. And if you have a background in representing people who can't afford lawyers and have one appointed for them, as the Miranda warning goes, that we all know, you're going to bring a slightly different perspective than somebody who's been a federal prosecutor. It doesn't mean one's a good justice and one's a bad justice, but we all are shaped by the experiences that we bring to our jobs, whether we're writers or justices or professors.
It's such an amazing point. The experiential diversity that we should be seeing and we are seeing on the Supreme Court will also have certainly an impact in years to come as we're looking at this. Just to get back to process for 1 minute, because we had a really good question come in, in our feed. Because votes recently for the justices have been very partisan, given the Republican base won't be as engaged with this, or we won't see a big huge change, makeup change on the bench, do you think we'll see a more bipartisan vote for Judge Jackson, or do you think this will be another one that will look like fall on partisan lines when the Senate finally votes?
Well, I guess it depends on what the meaning of bipartisan is.
Yeah.
I'm not remembering the confirmation vote for Justice Breyer off the top of my head, but I think it was something like 87-13.
Yeah.
We will never, I don't think in my lifetime, see a bipartisanship like that. Justice Scalia was confirmed, I think, by 92-8 votes. It will be almost always, almost entirely along party lines, but not entirely. Judge Jackson got 3 votes from Republicans, got all the Democrats and 3 Republican votes when she was confirmed just last year for the DC Circuit. And it wasn't as if people didn't know then where she might be heading. I wrote a column before she was selected for the DC Circuit saying you've never heard of Ketanji Brown Jackson probably, but you might want to start paying attention because she's probably not just going to the DC Circuit, she's probably going to the Supreme Court. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Susan Collins of Maine, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska voted for her then. Senator Graham seems to be in a little bit of a hissy fit now because his preferred candidate wasn't selected, Michelle Childs of South Carolina. So he's talking about how this is, it's ridiculous, but he's talking about how this is Biden's capitulation to the radical left of the party. It is not. But I think it's very possible that Senator Collins and Senator Murkowski will vote for Judge Jackson. And I think it is also within the realm of possibility that some of the retiring senators who voted against Judge Jackson for the appeals court last year might do what I would consider to be the right thing and vote to confirm her to the Supreme Court. So I'm thinking about people like Rob Portman of Ohio, Roy Blunt of Missouri, and a few others who, and I think, does it matter if you're confirmed by a party line vote or with some Republican votes? Not in the end. A justice is a justice, and it doesn't really matter whether you're confirmed by 92 votes or 51 votes. But the reality is it's better for the country.
Yeah.
We can achieve some level of bipartisanship.
Yeah.
Some level of bipartisanship means like 5 or 6 would be a triumph from my point of view.
I like that you're talking about. We could debate the definition of that now, too. Ruth, I have to say it's great you're joining us also on an important day. It's State of the Union Day here, in Washington D.C. and for the country. So President Biden's going to address not only Congress but the nation tonight. Certainly, there's many topics that he will be covering. Some that he probably didn't expect when he first, locked in the date a while ago, but. Will he address his Supreme Court nominee, do you think, tonight? Will there be, some kind of mention of this in the process this evening?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is being able to name a Supreme Court justice is one of the greatest gifts that a president can have. Almost all presidents, Jimmy Carter, I think, was the last one who didn't get to name any justices. Mm-hmm. But this is a real, that is sort of one of your marks in the history books, is what justice you name to the court. President Biden, close to the top of his role in the history books will be, and he named the first Black female Supreme Court justice. He has a lot of, he has some things to brag about. He has a lot of problems that he has to share with the American people, most of all the terrible attack and invasion of Ukraine. But I am 100% confident that he will find some time in the speech to shout out Judge Jackson and to talk about how proud he is of this nomination.
Well, listen, we are just honored. We could go on and on. This has been a snapshot because I think we are also honored that you're going to be joining one of our current fellows, Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, for her seminar series on March 14th at 1 p.m. It's going to be a continued conversation about the issues that we're talking about tonight and today. And on March 14th, I think we'll be a little bit different place in the process. It'll be interesting if we'll have more to discuss, and certainly about the nuances. But I encourage everybody also, please go to the Sine Institute, to the website, RSVP for that event. We want to make sure that if you're interested in this topic, you're getting to hear more from Ruth and joining certainly Congresswoman Comstock. Please sign up for our newsletter and our social media, and our next newsletter will also let everybody know how they can get Ruth's book, because if you're interested in the Supreme Court overall, this book's incredible and talks about the impact of some of these justices and the Brett Kavanaugh nomination and him going on the court. So Ruth, we're always a fan of you here at the Sine Institute. We love that you were a part of the inaugural fellowship. We are really looking forward to you joining one of our current fellows to talk about these important issues. And so thanks for the continued work, and we'll stay in touch. We'll see you on the 14th, and we'll get to know a little bit more about what's happening with this.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me today.
Okay, thank you so much, Ruth. Take care.
Bye.